everybody. Hello to all passionate negotiators around the world. Welcome to the new episode of podcast on negotiation with a very, very special guest. We have Francesco Marchi with us. And Francesco has a profound background in negotiation training, has trained hundreds, if not thousands, of EU officials and diplomats around the world. And together we'll talk about negotiation as an organizational capability. My name is Remy Smolinski, and welcome to the next episode of Podcast on Negotiation. Francesco, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, so good evening to everyone, and thanks very much, Remy, for inviting me to share some ideas. So about myself, I work at the ISEC-IRENE, so Institute for Research and Education on Negotiation in Paris. And in the last 13 years, I've been training EU officials for the European Commission, European External Action Service. So I spend a long time training in negotiation, international negotiation, multilateral negotiation, sharing skills. And in the spare time, if we can say so, because I've got a lot of training, as you see, I'm in Brussels for the first in-presence training after 2 years. In the spare time, I teach still at the university. So I'm a professor, I'm a visiting professor at the College of Europe in the Department of International Relations and Diplomacy. And I teach also at Sciences Po in Paris. So always international negotiation and European negotiation. And I'm very happy to be here with you this evening.
It's amazing, right? It's been a long day for you, given the fact that you've just finished training EU officials. The more I appreciate you spending time with us this evening. So, Francesco, normally when we talk about negotiation, we talk about it. The unit of analysis is individual. We talk about building negotiation skills. We talk about how to become better negotiators and as individuals. Yeah. It would be great if you could explain briefly what it means to change the unit of analysis to an organization. And what is the new perspective that it offers us? Why does it make sense? And what is the value behind switching from an individual or skill of an individual to a capability of an organization?
Okay, let's say that during the trainings, during my research and the contact with the EU official, I've seen that the model proposed by Adrian Borbély and Andrea Caputo in 2017 in their famous articles on organizational capability was resonating very much with the challenges that those people in the EU or in public administration were exposed to. And it's interesting because they identify 4 levels. First, the individual. So, okay, you are an active listener, you know how to behave, emotional resilience. But still, it's very important to consider the linkages with different negotiations that your organization is running, right? You are the EU, you are negotiating an FTA with a given country, but at the same time, you are negotiating an FTA with another country, right? You are negotiating common agricultural policy plan with a given member states, the Czech Republic, but you're negotiating with Poland, with Spain, and precedents or concessions you've made somewhere else may backfire into another negotiation. So having a vision of the different negotiation is very important. But it's also very meaningful to look at the infrastructure level. That means which is the managerial support that you have for your own negotiation. How many are you in your team? We are 2. We have 1 legal advisor, and from the other side, there are 50, right? I bump into an agency, I will not name necessarily which agency of the EU, but they had to negotiate contemporarily at the same time with 27 national regulatory agencies, and they had 1 legal advisor. So that the problem was there. Probably not only European Union example. Recently, I was training the cybersecurity team of the Ministry of Interior in France, people that were in charge of the French presidency of the EU. And there we saw that there was a tension between police, gendarmerie, different mindset. There was also an interesting problem that those people needed to get legal advice. Then they had to coordinate with the General Secretariat of European Affairs. It means that the managerial support on the infrastructure level is meaningful, and it's pertinent to analyze negotiation dynamics because you are in a situation of sequential interdependence. You need the given service to perform a task so that you can move on into the process of negotiation, right? And I think that also the last level, the capability level of the overall organization. I mean, to what extent, as an organization, you are able to capitalize, or first to find good practices, analyze what you're doing, which is your performance, and now you can redistribute across the whole organization the good practices so that people are learning, so that you are capitalizing, and also that you identify potentially the mistakes and you try to remove them, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that their organizational model of negotiation, it does resonate very much with what I've seen, so that I started, looking at how their model could be applied to the European Union. And last example, the Brexit. You need Michel Barnier, of course, as a negotiator. But Michel Barnier needed a 50-people task force. I had the privilege to work with a couple of times. And you probably need to coordinate with European Parliament, with the 27 member states. So, I mean, individual matters, but also the organizational capability. It's important because you need to have an alignment on strategic purposes and objectives. Voilà.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. So it's not only individual skill, but also linkages, but also processes, but also when we put it all together, it adds up to a capability of an organization, which define its ability to deal with potential partners and stakeholders. Francesco, when you think about, it's probably not a dichotomy, right? So either we have it or we don't have it, right? In terms of negotiation capability, I can imagine that it's a process, right? It always starts with individuals, right? Because they somehow first need to acquire a certain level of skills before any magic can happen on a higher level, higher organizational level, right? And there's this concept of negotiation maturity, organizational negotiation maturity. As I was preparing for today's talk, I was very much puzzled by this. Could you maybe explain what negotiation maturity is all about, and how it's divided into different stages, how to move from one to the other? Why is it relevant?
Okay, let's say that my reflection on that point was driven by the study conducted by U28 International, Improved Corporate Negotiation, that was already published in 2009. And when I bumped into it a couple of years ago, I was very, wow, that's great. There are good things, and it was kind of puzzling also, that concept of negotiation maturity. But it corresponds to the level of awareness of the negotiation that is present in your organization, right? Because if you consider negotiation at organizational level, you need to look at, and these studies is identifying 10 parameters. Negotiation processes. Do you have negotiation processes that are standardized and your negotiator are compliant with those processes? Which is the level of cross-organizational collaboration, coordination, alignment, stakeholders that are involved. But also they are mentioning data collection, preparation and planning. Do you have common tools? What about negotiation trainings, right? To what extent are you able to train, I think, in your organization, and to have a world-class bunch of negotiators, right, that can defend your opinion. Just to give you an example on this, the negotiation training, I think that what we did with the SEC-IRENE, with the European Commission, it was a kind of success, because rather than having a scattered set of trainings, here and there, we built a negotiator's learning path. So a sort of parkour with 8 seminars, starting from basic negotiation skills to multilateral, then chairings, was a kind of tracking the progress of the organization. But that study was, interestingly enough, also pointing to other factors that may show the level of maturity. The measurement of negotiation success. Okay, how can you measure your negotiation success? Because when it comes to business, right, you can quantify, but when it comes to negotiating an FTA or a political and economic partnership, when you are negotiating a text, what may sound as a technical success may be perceived as a political failure, and vice versa. So that to be a reliable negotiators, a mature negotiators, you need to agree internally. The notion of success with the people you're working with is not an individual matter. What should be a success for us? And then I think that there are other relevant factors that were very catching my attention. The motivation for negotiation success. To what extent are you able to reward the negotiators in your organization? I go to Peru and I'm involved in 5 days multilateral negotiation. I get back to office and no one is saying me thanks. Or on the contrary, you get some benefits, you got extra holidays, you got some kind of rewards. I mean, it does change. And then one important element to, I think, measure the maturity of an organization is the capacity to identify where the negotiations are taking place in your organization. Who are the people that are negotiating? One of the classic themes that we listen in all the training of negotiation, everyone is negotiating. Yes, but negotiating where you go to the cinema with your wife is not equal to negotiating an FTA with an American administration, right? And the problem is that one interesting things we did with the European Union institution, it was to look at who had the negotiation word in their job description. And very surprisingly, we, looking at the job description of all the 35,000 something officials, we came out with a list of 740 people, showing that very few had the job description negotiation, in the negotiation in their job description. It means that you don't know the people who are negotiating, because probably you are an intellectual property expert, you are negotiating, but you're labeled as an intellectual property expert, nor as a negotiator. It means that you will not receive necessarily the training for negotiating, right? So I think that there is a very important element in there, knowing where are your negotiators. And then another element of maturity that was in that study and that really got my attention is your capacity to capitalize on good practices, right? To what extent you have after-action report. To what extent you capitalize on good practices and now you mobilize people to stick to those good practices. And of course, it's very challenging. It's very difficult, right?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Francesco. And so we have negotiation maturity in terms of the ultimate objective of learning organizations in terms of their negotiation capability. Yeah? Whose job is it at an organization to build negotiation as an organizational capability? Is that the head? Is it a top-down approach? Is it a bottom-up approach? How does this collective capability on organizational level emerge? Is it can it be ordered from above, or does it have to be consolidated and move up from those who have enjoyed negotiation training and then disseminated in the organization? How does it usually work, Francesco?
Okay, it can work in different ways, right? But the problem is that if you want to increase your organizational capabilities, people think that they it's sufficient to invest in negotiation training, right? And that's not the way it goes. I mean, already Morvius and Lawrence Susskind in 2009, they were reflecting on that problematic, Build to Win, Creating World-Class Organization in their famous book. And they pointed the figure to this. Usually people are training middle management people, right? But when they will have new concepts, when they will have new practices, there will be a bottleneck effect because the leadership is not receptive, right? And this is what we see. Because you attend the negotiation training on 2 days, then you go back to your office and things go as they have been going. Path dependency, because you will be the only one to have new ideas, and you probably have to convince people who have this path dependence behavior, right? So that in my perspective, and also in what comes up from different researches, is that you have first to get a serious audit in negotiation. Looking at your processes, look at it, what's wrong, where are your negotiators, how many they are, how many you need of them, and then to train the top, because it's the leadership who should get new ideas and encourage the people to attend trainings, and then it's the organization that should mobilize this awareness on negotiation. Individual, of course, are necessary. And why I'm telling you this, because it could be also the other way around. It means that individual, they start talking, they start realizing how important. So also the bottom up can help the leadership to realize how important it is. But unless you have the decision from the top of changing direction, nothing is going to work. Right?
Yes. So basically, I think I can absolutely relate and understand. Right. So basically, your perspective is, in an organization, everybody tends to look up rather than look down. Right. So if the example doesn't come from above, it's not going to happen. Right. So if my boss, if my superior is a negotiation enthusiast, then I know that by following his or her example, I will gain his or her acceptance, promotion, and so on and so on. And so, if we look at Francesco, you've spent many years thinking about negotiation maturity and negotiation capability on an organizational level. When we think about examples of organizations that score really, really high on the maturity index. Yeah, so you've mentioned the negotiation audit, right, which tries to capture various dimensions of negotiation maturity. What examples come to your mind as of organizations that in which negotiation maturity is high or the highest?
Well, this is the $100 million question. Because I think that already the study from 2008, that was a very extensive one with more than 124 interviews from the 500 Fortune's companies, they just came up with 5% of companies that are able to be fully mature. So to identify challenges, to set up processes, to start sharing good practices, to encourage compliance, and then to redistribute in this kind of learning cycle, because people are involved always in a cyclical kind of negotiation, So I wouldn't have examples. As I said, this is the best, we should go towards that direction. So what can I say is that we may learn from highly reliable organization. There are interesting things that they are doing. I don't know, aviation companies, nuclear plant, surgery block, the army. These are people that are highly reliable. So maybe they are a little bit more mature because they invest more in after-action report. These examples are the examples that are very known in the book of Christian Morel, Les Décisions Absurdes, so the absurd decision. So by looking at, that kind of organization that decide to do very simple things, but basics that help this kind of, path towards maturity. And this may help. We may take inspiration from them. Well,
Yes, so reliability, reputation, trustworthiness it seems to be a common theme when it comes to implying the need for high negotiation maturity, for building up high negotiation maturity. But Francesco, you've trained hundreds, if not thousands, of EU officials, right? Various EU institutions. I would be interested, in your opinion, to find out what you think about negotiation maturity of the EU, various EU bodies, EU institutions, because basically they are there. Their reasons for existence is managing relationships. So one could venture to say that, hey, these institutions should have probably among the highest negotiation maturity index scores among all organizations out there. What is the reality? Yeah.
Okay, so thanks for that question. That is another $100 million question to answer. But in fact, what I've been doing the last 2 years, it was to look at those parameters while training people, while discussing with them. And I cannot have a judgment. They are mature, they are not mature. What is interesting is that in the European Union, you may find different level of maturity according to the policy areas that we are dealing with. And this can be easily explained by the fact that there are some policy areas in which the EU has exclusive competence since a long time. This means that the processes have been fine-tuned, that there is a kind of institutional memory who has been transferred from different generation of EU officials so that you have already, a solid basis. And there are new policy areas, notably foreign policy, or also other areas that were, like minor things, like to buy vaccines on behalf of the member states. In 2017, it was like, okay, guys, but this is member state competence. Then there was the COVID, so that we discovered that the joint procurement probably would be helpful to negotiate on behalf of 27 instead of buying, So it depends really of the policy areas. And also, the European Union has been challenged in terms of maturity because you've got some policy areas who were not politically salient. And then because of the migration crisis, because of the Ukraine, the energy, so that you got, an unpredictability about the issues to deal with that may render the issue complex. And then, of course, I think that to explain the EU negotiation maturity, we need to look not only at the negotiation maturity, but we need to look at the political maturity of the EU. And the political maturity of the EU, that is challenging, right? People are criticizing. There are many heads to be put together. And when you have a compound political system with different stakeholders, hundreds of stakeholders, of course, the level of maturity at political level is low. And this will impact, of course, the negotiation maturity. When you look at interinstitutional rivalries between the European External Action Service, the European Commission, the Council, things have changed as progress, certainly. But I remember that together with my colleagues of Sekirene, we were training in 2010 the people that were to join the European External Action Service from national diplomacies, from the DG Relex, DG DEFCO, and I wouldn't say that there were so much friends at the beginning. Now we have seen a huge evolution. That's the point. But I would have to say one thing, that what I've seen myself in the European Union is that there are sort of small bubble of very high maturity in which you have very cohesive teams that have been working for years together. But then there is also a lot of mobility in the European Union. And part of the maturity is to have an institutional memory of good practices. And if you don't take stock of this and you have the mobility, higher mobility is certainly wonderful, but for institutional memory and to take stock of good practices, you're losing a lot of institutional memory and negotiation memory when people are changing job. So this is detrimental.
Yes, so it's a diverse picture. You're painting a diverse picture from high expertise, high maturity levels, very often correlated with political maturity and experience, to completely novice areas, which then are still to build their negotiation maturity scores. Francesco, when we think about negotiation maturity, it's obviously it's not an objective in itself, right? So no organization exists just to have a high negotiation maturity score, right? So, what is the reason for a CEO of a commercial company or a director general of an EU directorate, right? What would be a reason for them to invest their time, effort, money, resources into building negotiation as an organizational capacity in their units, institutions, or in their companies? What is the reason? Yeah, is there a benefit if I score high on the maturity index? Am I a better organization than if I don't, or am I not?
Okay, so I will answer with twofold answer. First one, I think that when you are have a high level of maturity, you are more resilient in negotiation, right? And resilience, it's a very a la mode concept today. You have to be a resilient manager. You need to be there. But in fact, resilience comes from the physics of material. Okay, it was Messier Charpy, a mechanician in Grenoble, who invented la pendule de Charpy. So this mechanism was hitting a material and measuring the capacity to resist to external shocks. And now we use it currently in negotiation, management, team building, whatever. So if you are mature, you have more chances of being resilient to external shocks. And that's fundamental. In this very volatile international system in which we all navigate, COVID, come on, Ukraine, we have sudden crisis, and of course you will be more resilient, right? I think that this is one of the first reasons. And then specifically to the EU system, I think that if you are more mature, you will survive in negotiation because some of the concepts that we have been familiarized with, thanks to the getting to yes, the Bible of negotiation, and the famous concept of BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, of course, is simply non-existent in European level. And
right,
this
yes.
was one of the first things that I got right in my face when I started training people in the EU, because a couple of diplomats told me, Mr. Macchi, thanks for sharing your BATNA, but it does not exist in my negotiation because I have no plan B. Okay, there is no plan B for my negotiation. If I have no deal with UK during the Brexit, I will have no deal. There is no alternative, right? If I negotiate the accession of the European Union to the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, whether I do it, whether I don't, right? And I think that being in such an uncertain environment will increase your agility and resilience on how to cope with those situations in which you have no BATNA, right? And this is one of the concepts that should structure the power balance at the negotiation table. But when you don't have it,
makes sense. I also read in one of the reports on negotiation maturity and audits. I think it was the Hathwaite report that high maturity levels also correlate with financial performance. That the organizations, commercial organizations that scored high on their negotiation maturity also achieved, I think, I'm not sure if I remember correctly, around 40% more net income than the others. Yeah? So there's also a very, 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 very tangible reason to believe that negotiation as an organizational capability matters because it pays off. Obviously, there's a question of chicken and egg. So what's first, right? One or the other. But I like to think about negotiation maturity as a independent variable in this equation. Yes. Have you had any thoughts on how to explain this better economic performance of commercial organizations with higher maturity and negotiation maturity indexes?
But I think that they learn a lot more, so that they are able to correct their underperformance, right? And I think that the parameters developed into the maturity index from Outweight, they point the finger to one basic element in negotiation, that is internal alignment of purpose, internal alignment of objective, and internal alignment of strategy. Because you can agree on, we need to get 10. Okay, right. We all agree, guys. But then how do you get these 10? And if you get 8, how can we explain it? What are the changes that need to be done? How many times training teams and training people in the Francesco, that a brilliant analysis, brilliant report. So we need to change this. We need to coordinate more with that director general. Okay, right, guys. So nice analysis. You meet them 2 months later. So guys, did you manage to implement those changes? We didn't have time. I plenty of those things. Why? Because our managerial level is not supporting those changes. It's too big. It's too cost, right? And I will close at that point because I cannot pretend to be an expert on commercial negotiation. I've been involved in international relations and diplomacy and EU affairs, so it's not my field. But what I've seen in terms of maturity, that they explain, people preparing the work of the working groups and the council, right? You have a chair, you have a secretariat, they do invest. And you have the classic divide. People that try to prepare very little and consult bilaterally very little, and then they do everything into the meeting. This is recipe for failure. Yeah, but we don't have time. And you have smarter people, more mature in my perspective, in terms of negotiation, then they tell me, Francesco, we don't send email. We call the 27 delegation and try to get in contact with them. We build a relationship. We know who they are. And in 10 minutes, the meeting is over. And when you have those two visions in a classroom, I can assure to you that there are still people who do defend, no, let's not invest in preparation. Well, that's explain how it goes.
Even after 40 years of negotiation research. Yes, Francesco, my very, very last question. Yes, a question I always ask to always ask my guests about. It's about great negotiators. Be it contemporary or historical. Anybody that comes to your mind in terms of being a North Star role model. Shining through either the negotiation process or obtained results. Anyone who comes to your mind. Last question.
It's a kind of very difficult question. Okay, but I will give you 2 answers. Okay. I think that Michel Barnier, what he did during the Brexit, was very impressive, right? And therefore also for the people that are listening to us, do this exercise. Go on the Twitter account of Boris Johnson and then go on the Twitter account of Michel Barnier and look at the different approaches they had on negotiation. Internal coordination, alignment of European Council agenda with the Brexit rounds of negotiation. Circulating across the capital to inform your people, the people you are accountable to. Excellent, right? And then probably it's going to be a kind of cliche, but I allow myself to do this. I think that the best negotiators are Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. because I mean, it's a kind of example, that when you are powerless, when you got nothing, you can still be powerful. And that's a very important message, I think, that we can give. Because, power in negotiation is multidimensional. And I think that you have to invest on your capital, negotiation capital, be it emotional, cognitive, reputational, cultural. And this is somehow something that I've seen in the European Union. Individual make a difference. And thanks God we are talking about organizational capabilities, but I want to close this podcast with that very important message that despite the importance of the organizational capability, what I've seen in 13 years in Brussels, that individual can make a huge difference. Voila.
Thank you so much, Francesco, for your time and inspiration, sharing your inspirational thoughts. That's a perfect ending note. Negotiation is an important organization capability. It has an impact on negotiations, on an organizational performance, but it starts with an individual. Thank you so much, Francesco. It was a delight to have you on our podcast.
Grazie. Ciao a tutti. Arrivederci. Bye bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.